There were 3 people in the compartment when he got in, all women. There was an elderly bag lady in a thick wool coat, muttering to herself and knitting what looked like a sock. Opposite her was an elegant middle-aged businesswoman, with dark hair and glasses. She was knitting too. That seemed a little out of character, but it was just starting to get fashionable again, or so his mother had told him. In the far corner there was a rather nice-looking girl, and she was knitting, which suggested his mother had been right about something for once. In any event, they seemed harmless enough. He chose a seat in the middle of the carriage, sat down, opened his book, and raised it in front of him like a shield. The windows were black, of course, so there was no visible world outside. All he could see in the one next to him was the reflection of the pretty girl, and it didn't do to dwell on pretty girls who might look up and figure out what you were doing. Instead, he looked up at the advertising boards. One caught his attention, as it had been designed to do. "Where is Theo Bernstein?" That was all. White letters on a black background. For a moment he allowed himself to wonder who Theo Bernstein was and what he was selling. Then he realized he'd been ensnared by evil capitalists and looked away. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the elegant businesswoman bite through a strand of wool with her teeth. It was an incongruously savage act, though perfectly reasonable when he thought about it. After all, you aren't allowed to have sharp things on you in a public place. Teeth, however, are the oldest and most basic weapons of all. The train had slowed down to the point where, with no view through the window, it was impossible to tell if it was moving or standing still. He yawned. He had had enough of this journey. He was in the kind of limbo between the culmination of one sequence of events and the start of another that you get in restaurants after you've finished eating, before they bring the bill. He looked around for something, other than the pretty girl, to graze his mind on. Not much of that kind of thing in a tube compartment. Further down the carriage, he saw 4 more black advert boards with white lettering. The Theo Bernstein people were clearly determined to get their message across. He shuffled in his seat to get comfy and tried to read his book. But that was no good. It was a self-help thing she'd given him to read, shortly before she'd stormed out of his life, slamming the door on the sunlight, and he really couldn't be bothered. Coping with rejection, snickered the chapter heading. Yeah, right. All that time he never realized. The old woman had spoken. He winced. He hoped she wasn't going to make a nuisance of herself. He never realized, she repeated, that she was carrying on with his worst enemy behind his back. Oh, God, he thought, and glanced up to see how many stops there were still to go. But since he hadn't been keeping track, he wasn't entirely sure where he was. Could be anywhere. Right under his nose, said the elegant woman. She hadn't looked up from her knitting. Morris peered at her round the cover of his book. Odd, he thought. He'll find out quite soon, said the old woman. He'll be heartbroken. Actually, she didn't sound particularly batty. If anything, she sounded like a Radio 4 anchor. So, come to think of it, did the elegant woman, who now said, that and losing his job. Presumably, then, they knew each other. Then why were they sitting half a compartment apart? Of course, said the girl,
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.